Hi, I'm Carol Thielen. This is a recording of a presentation I did at an online workshop on Zoom. It was geared towards AccuQuilt users. It's a bit long, but I think if you hang in there and watch it, you'll get a lot of good information. I'm taking you from the very beginning of finding a block to designing a quilt and then finding the units in the block and the fabric needed to complete your quilt. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this.
I want to introduce everybody to you, Carol. Carol is a very, very knowledgeable quilter. And I don't know, were you an engineer, Carol?
Yes.
Well, and when you retired, is that right? When you retired, you started working on this quilt calculator?
Well, I've been working on it off and on for a long time. I just never knew how to give it to the world. And so I finally just taught myself how to code computers. So I do enough to get by. You know, I'm not a professional by any means, but I started quilting in 1994 and I was in my last semester at college. I went to college late. I had two kids and I was studying engineering. And between my last two semesters, it was Christmas and I wanted something to do. So I picked up a magazine and there was a log cabin quilt designed as a Noel wreath. And so that was my first entry into quilt making. And most of the time I've been self-taught, but I do love to take classes. So I worked in engineering for probably about 6 years and I wanted to stay home with my kids. And then that's when I really started quilting. I was a long arm quilter for many years and I've written several books and I've always liked to teach.
How did you pull AccuQuilt into your quilting? When did you meet AccuQuilt and start using it?
It wasn't until probably, I don't know, the early 2000s, and the quilt shop, my local quilt shop, had the AccuQuilt, and I used it a few times. And I actually bought a baby, it was called Go Baby at the time, the little Go Me. I had a few dies, and I didn't really use it that much until I had opened a quilt shop for a few years and I was looking into it as something else to add to the quilt shop. And it dawned on me that I did like this at one time. So I bought a machine and I started using it and I was just hooked on it then because I knew I'd always wanted to do it, but it's just getting started. You know, you always hear these people say that, oh, I've got all these dies and I've never used them or I'm afraid to use them. Well, that was me. And so once I started being an AccuQuilt dealer, we just had a whole room dedicated to AccuQuilt. And we had an AccuQuilt club, and everybody loved it that used it there. Once you start using it, you're hooked, I think. It was for me. Really surprised out there, there's not a lot of information for people that have the AccuQuilt, how to use it, you know, other than the videos and very good videos from AccuQuilt that are online when you have questions and to get down to the nitty gritty. And then the other thing was, since I owned a quilt shop and I taught, I always had questions from people about, well, how much fabric do I need if I want to make a queen size quilt or a twin size quilt? They have this pattern that makes a wall hanging. The block is beautiful. They want to make it a bigger quilt. How do they do that? I had this little formula I would use and just punch it in my calculator and figure out their fabric. And I thought, why couldn't I just put this on the internet? And so that's how this website got started.
Well, this is wonderful, and we're looking forward to hearing how it works.
Oh, it's going to be fun. I really like it, and I think it'll help a lot of people. So I guess we can get started if everybody's ready. Okay, perfect. I might stop some parts in the middle if in case just to make sure people are understanding. So we can do that.
Yep.
That's great. Okay. This is the website. It's called QuiltNotes.com. And I'm going to go over a few of these tabs up here just to show you some of the things. This, of course, is the home page. This is calculators. When you click on this, you will have three calculators. The first one is straight set quilt. That's if you're going to set your quilts straight. The second one is for on-point settings. And both of these, you'll have the option of adding up to 5 borders and cornerstones and sashing if you like. So I'm going to demo the straight set because you'll need this later on in the presentation. So you just click on this image and you'll see this is the default settings that show up. You have a little quilt here. It has the quilt size here. And these are just default information that's put in a 12-inch block. And the blocks are set 2 across and 3 down. And it has a 2-inch sashing. And all these are finished sizes. Then you can put up to 5 borders all here. But for now, I'm going to make the borders all 0, just so you can see. And you have to have a 0 or a number in there, or you'll get an error. You can't just blank out the number. And I'm going to take the sashing down to 0 as well. So let's just say you wanted a 60 by 80-inch quilt. And right now your quilt is 24 by 36. And we have a 12-inch block. If I make this block bigger, 13 by 13, you see the quilt size increases. And so let's put it back down to 12. And so now you can start adding blocks across and blocks down. So if you see when I add click this to make the block setting larger, that this number, the width of the quilt, will increase. So there's 4 blocks and 5 blocks. So now you have your width is 60 inches. And you do the same thing with the blocks down, the number of blocks down, and you have a 72 inches. And this number here at the bottom tells you that there are 30 blocks in this quilt. So let's see what happens when we add a sashing. I'm just going to add a 2-inch sashing, and I'll add a 4-inch border. So now our quilt size is 80 by 94. And you can put in your project name if you want to. So once you're happy with this layout and this quilt size, you just click this button, Submit, and it shows you all of the fabric requirements for that quilt except for the blocks. So here is our quilt information. The block size is 12 by 12. The block setting is 5 across and 6 down. The quilt size, 80 by 94. And the number of blocks is 30. Then you have the binding fabric you need. It tells you how many strips to cut. Here's the backing fabric for either 45-inch or 108-inch wide. Then we go down to the sashing. You have 2 choices, the sashing without cornerstones and the sashing with cornerstones. So it gives you the fabric and the cutting requirements for both of those choices. And then the border, here's the border number 1. If you're cutting crosswise cuts, that's the width of fabric. This is how much you need and how many strips you need to cut. And the lengthwise cuts, that's cutting along the selvage edge. It tells you how much you need for that. So what you can do once you have these results is you can right-click your mouse if you're on the Windows and press Print. And it will probably go on 2 pages. So here's the second page. Go down to your settings, More Settings. Click on that. And then we're going to go to the scale. And usually if you put in about 80, you'll be able to get it on 1 page. So this one we're not. So let's go down to 70. So there you can have it all on 1 page and you can print that out if you like. Or you can just take a picture, print the screen. If you're on an iPad, I believe you just have a long press and then your little menu will show up to print. I haven't tried it on there, or I have, but I can't remember now. So I'm going to cancel this out. So then you can just do that. It works the same way for the quilts, the blocks on point, only there's not that little diagram from the page before. So that's these calculators. That's what that button is. And this is something else we'll do later. Then I have blocks. When I first started the website, I just put different blocks up here where you could choose a block and get the yardage. This first part is common units, squares and rectangles, half square triangles, quarter square triangles. And then there's a bunch of one patch quick blocks, 2x2 grid, 3x3 grid, and so on. So if we click on one of these, and it gives you the shoe fly block, and here is a sample quilt. You just put in the number of blocks you need. So if you've gone through that first calculator, and remember we had 30 blocks on that one, and they were 12 inches. So I'm going to put 30 blocks here, and then a finished size 12 inches. Press the calculate button, and then all of your results will show up. So here is the background square, tells you how many you need and what size to cut them. And this is what you will probably be using. It tells you which AccuQuilt dies you can use for this square. And you'll just go and click on one of these. Let's say you have the 8-inch cube and you're going to use shape 1. We'll click on that. And before we do that, just keep in mind we need 120 of these squares. So we'll click on this, and here is your AccuQuilt die. It has a picture of it, which mat you use and which machines you can use. And we're going to put 120 in here and press calculate. And it tells you how much fabric you need in inches and yards. It tells you to cut 15 strips at 5 inches times the width of fabric and to fan fold 5-inch segments. So you just use that with your die. And I'm going to close this. And then on the rest of them, you have all the other pieces. This is the background square, the accent square, half square triangle units. So you have everything. Close out this. But here's what you're going to be really interested in, AccuQuilt. There are a lot of different ways you can search. Right now, I think I have about 280 dies in the database, and I'm trying to add all of them. Here you can search by your die number. So I'm going to put 555, and you see all these show up. And then if you put the whole number in, you'll be able to click on it, and you'll always get the same screen. So this is, I believe this is a bob die. This is block on board. And here you'll just put your number of blocks you need and hit the calculate button. So if we put 2 and calculate, then here's all the fabric you need. Fabric 1, and it tells you what shapes to put it on. This I took directly off of the instructions for the bob die. So it tells you exactly how much to cut and how to fold it, if you need to fan fold or if you need to put everything right sides up. So here are your other fabrics and your other shapes. And again, you can right click here and print this if you like. Okay, so let me close this. Here are just some various shapes. If you want to do flying geese, this gives you the choices. If you click on this one, you'll get circles, equilateral triangles, hexagons, and half hexagons. Over here is a list of all the AccuQuilt dies. So let's just click on that really fast. So here we say 276 dies in the database. And there's always a picture and a description and the die number. And any of these, if you click on them, you'll be able to go to your calculator for that die. Here's all the block on board dies. There's 77. I think I'm missing 2 or 3 of the latest ones are not on there yet. So this is done the same way as the other block on board we just looked at. You press the calculate button, you put the number of blocks you need, and it gives you the results. Let's just put 12 blocks, calculate, and this is a real easy one. There's just 2 fabrics. Okay, so let's get out of that. And then I just put in the setting triangle dies. So if you have your setting triangle dies, you can click on the ones you want. Here's a 4-inch, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12-inch blocks. Okay. Now this part we're going to be using.
This is really phenomenal, Carol. I just want you to know that.
Well, it helps me. I don't know how many times I go to my website just to figure this out too. So, but thank you. Okay, this is before we get to this, I'm going to show you down here. You know, everyone has probably seen the book 72 Block Patterns from the Mix and Match set. I have combined all the cubes into this because all of the blocks are the same. So if you have the 16 patch block, and there you can download the instructions for it, and then there's quilt ideas. Here we put the number of blocks. Let's say we want 12 blocks, and you can choose your finished size. So whatever cube you have, that's what you would select here. Let's go back here. Anyway, there's, I think, 72 of these blocks. Okay, this is I think the one you're going to use a lot. Here you can search by shape and finished size. So you can see you can choose from square, rectangle, half square, triangle, all the way down. These are everything that's in the cubes, whatever shapes are in the cubes are on here. And then some miscellaneous one like diamonds, the signature block, the kite center, English paper piece, and you can see those. So let's say we wanted a 3-inch square. So we choose square, and we go over here to the finished size. And these are all whole numbers. But if I click on the 3-inch, but let me just do on the 2-inch. It's a better example. So if I click on the 2-inch, it's going to give me everything from 2 inches up to, but not including 3 inches. So I have a 2-inch finished square, a 2.5-inch finished square, and then I think I have a 2.25-inch finished square here. Because it would have just been so cumbersome to list all the different sizes. So if you want a 3-inch square, you choose 3-inch. If you want 3.5, you choose 3-inch. It will give you everything between 3 and 4. So again, it's the same thing. You'll click on the die you have, and it'll give you all the information. If you ever want to go to the AccuQuilt website, you just click on here, and it'll take you to their website for that die if you need any more information. So let's get out of that. And again, you just put the number of squares you need, 120, calculate, and it tells you the fabric and how to cut it on your die. So now we're going to get to the fun part, I think.
Now, Carol, while you're doing that, one of the gals has got their hand raised. They have a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Wizzy?
Okay, if you could for a second, could you go back into that where you had all the bobs listed?
Yes. Okay, so under
I'm not holding out much hope for this, but this was a recent issue I had, so.
Okay, I'm going to click on the AccuQuilt tab, and all here are the block on board.
Yeah.
Did you have one you were interested?
Yeah, the double wedding ring. We can use the 11-inch finish.
Let's see, that's on this one right here, the 11-inch? Okay.
Yeah, and if you see, that's what they consider to be the block.
Yes.
But it's not really, because you have the other half of the arc
Right.
on each of the edges.
Yes.
And I had trouble trying to figure out the fabric for that because I couldn't get just the arc. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. If you look at the block, you'll see each block has 4 arcs.
Yeah.
So what I would do is say, okay, here's an arc, 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case. So I would add an extra block for this side. And then down here, there would be 3 here. So if you just go count all the edges. So I'm going to count this edge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you'll have 14 arcs you'll need to make. And so there's 4 per block. So 14 divided by 4 would be 4. You make some extra ones. You'll get 16 arcs.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? That's what I would do. Now, the fabric, when I have these calculations, I always add some to the fabric. So you should have plenty. But I always tell people to make a test block or test cut or something to see how they are getting it.
Right.
Because when you think about this, so let me do, if I put 20 blocks in here. So if you think, so if I wanted a 20 block quilt, I would put 24 for the block number. And this like tells you it's 49 inches. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. Our fabric doesn't have to be exact. It just has to be enough. So as long as we have enough, it's not like you're cutting squares. I mean, you're cutting the squares, but you're purchasing the fabric.
Okay.
So, and I think most of us always add more fabric anyway, but that's a great question because when I was putting this on there, I said, you know, they didn't even address this in their instructions.
No,
Yeah.
no. And I tried to draw it in EQ8 and wound up having to create my own custom
Yes. Yeah.
deal.
Been there. I've done that too.
Okay.
And then I
Thank
just
you
said,
so much.
okay, that'll give me enough fabric so I know I can just cut the pieces I need to put them in there. So great question. Okay. Now the next thing I want people to be able to do is, I'm gonna close this out for a minute. I've got this sample block here, and I know probably many of you have taken Eileen's grid or conversion class. So I'm going to show you how you can take this block, and I got this off Pinterest, and I have this fabric chart you can download, and I'll show you before we leave where you can download this. What we're going to do is look at this block, and we're going to take the units out of it. How is this block made up? So let me just show you. When I look at blocks, I know I probably do this a little bit different than Eileen, but this, you know, we all have our own way of doing things. So I first see this half square triangle, and I see that I have one of these in each corner. So I put lines around them. So I know I have 4 half square triangles in this block. So I'm going to come over here in this fabric chart, and you can put the block name. We'll just put one in here. We'll call it lesson. I don't know the unit size yet, but I do know that I need a half square triangle. And in this block, this says number in block, there are 4. So we're going to fill out that. And for now, that's all we're going to fill out for that. Then I'm going to look at what else can I see that I recognize. Well, I see this quarter square triangle. So I'm going to put a square around that. And then I also see this square in the center that's the same size. I'm going to go through here and just line out or draw out each one of these, because we're going to eventually find what kind of grid we have. Okay, let's look at these quarter square triangles and write those down here. So this is QST, and we see there are 4 in this block. So we'll put our 4 here. And then we have this center square. So I'm going to call this the center square. And we have 1 in the block. Now we have all these little squares and rectangles. So I'm going to go up to this rectangle first. And so we have 4 rectangles. 4. Oops. 4. And then we have all of these little squares. So I'm going to just make my grid for these little squares. And I'll do 2 of these. So you can see the corners are all the same. So I'm going to call this square here the light background. So it's a light background square. Just so I can differentiate the fabrics, because these squares are all going to be the same size, but how much fabric do we need of each? So the light squares, you see we have 4 in each block. So we'll put 4. And then we have this check fabric, and you see we have 2 in each corner. So we have 8 in the block. So I'm going to call this the check square. And we have 8. And then finally we have this little square, and we have 2 of those in each, 2 of those in each corner, and that makes 8 in the block. So we'll call that the medium background. And you can call this whatever you want, just whatever makes sense for you. And here we have 8.
Now, Carol, would you need to increase the number of quarter square triangles?
No, I'll show you why.
Okay.
We're gonna find the size of each one. So this is an odd grid. It doesn't make any sense. But if you see that we have 2 of these make up this side, and 2 of these squares make up this side. So what we're going to do is just cut this half square triangle into a grid. So this half square triangle takes up 4 grid spaces. Okay? And then we'll do the same thing for this half square triangle. And down here, I'll do this. And over here, I didn't do these squares over here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to connect this grid. So I'm going to go across and cut this quarter square triangle in half. And I'm going to do the same thing up here with this rectangle and the quarter square triangle and the square. So I'm going to fill out all the rest of my grid doing that. So we'll cut this in half. I have a lot of green on here so you can see what's going on. Okay, looks like I have the whole grid. So all of these grid spaces are even right now. They're all the same size. But the units we have that fill those grid spaces are different. So if we look at, let's look at the grid first. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's an 8 by 8 grid. We have 8 spaces across and 8 spaces down. And up here, I'm going to put, here I have the grid size. I'm going to put, grid size. We're going to put 8 by 8. So this is an 8 by 8 grid. Now we need to look at what size do we want. So in our, on QuiltNotes, we have another little chart. And right here under charts, we're going to, here's the fabric chart. This is where you can download the chart that I'm filling out now. And it's in QuiltNotes under charts. This one in the center, select grid and block finished size. So we know we have an 8-inch grid. Let's choose our, 8 by 8 grid. And now we can choose the block size. Now, how I came up with these block sizes, if you look at the 8-inch finished size of an 8 by 8 grid, that means that each of these grid units here will finish at 1 inch. So you have, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So if I have a 12-inch block and I choose 12 inches, the grid unit size is going to be 1.5 inches. So this is 1.5, this is 1.5. Every one of these grid spaces is 1.5 inches finished. We always deal with finished sizes. So does that make sense? Because this is where I usually start losing people. So
Oh, no, this goes along with the pattern conversion class that I teach.
Yes. Mhm. So now we have to look at, so let's just choose a 12-inch block. And so the grid unit size is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to put up here the block size is 12 inches and the grid unit size is 1.5 inches. 1.5, okay? So that tells me I'm looking at my half square triangle. How big do I need to make this? If my grid unit size is 1.5 inches, and we look up here, 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3. So this is a 3-inch finished half square triangle. And so I'm going to write that here. When I say unit size, that's this unit. So we'll put 3 inches in here. Same thing with the quarter square triangle. 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3 inches. So that's a 3-inch finished quarter square triangle. Put that there. Same thing with the center square. It's a 3-inch finished center square. Now let's look at the rectangle. We have 1.5 and 1.5. So it's 3 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. So we'll put 1.5 by 3. So that rectangle is 1.5 by 3-inch finished. Let's look at the light background square. That's this square right here. And actually all of these squares just take up one space. So they all finish at 1.5 inches. So all these are 1.5. Okay. So now we know what units we have, what finished size of each unit, and how many of each unit are in this one block. In this chart, I've got space for 6 fabrics because that's what fit on one sheet of paper. So up here, I'm going to write the fabric, whatever the fabric we're going to call it. So let's look at this fabric up here in the corner, and we'll call that the dark floral. Just so we'll know which fabrics we're looking at. And this one here, I'm going to call this the medium background. It's the other half of the half square triangle. Medium background. We're writing these across. And then what else do we have? We have the check. So let's write the check. And we have this, it's kind of a blue color. We'll call this light blue. So light blue. And we'll call this center square dark blue. And then what do we have? Something left. I thought there were 6.
Light background.
Oh, light, thank you. Light background. Perfect. I knew there was another one. Okay, so that's all our fabric. Now we're just going to go take each one at a time. And I'm going to pull up my quilt notes again. And we're going to go to the AccuQuilt. And this one down here, search by shape and size. I forgot about this field right here. Number of blocks. Let's use our number of blocks from when we designed the quilt, and we said there were 30 blocks at 12 inches. So I'm going to put 30 on here. This is the number of blocks in the quilt. And you see, it's going to go for every one of these because it's always the same number of blocks for this quilt. So now we'll have to find the total number. So 30 times 4 is 120. So this means I need to make 120 3-inch finished half square triangles. Okay?
Yeah.
Same thing with this one. There are 4 times 30 is 120. In the center square, 1 times 30 is 30. And so these are also 120.
I think there are 8 half square triangles. There's 4 dark and 4 light. Am I right or wrong?
We're talking about the unit, the half square triangle unit. Once it's sewn, you have the half square triangle. So it's got a light fabric and a dark fabric. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it now.
Okay, perfect. And you'll see why in just a second. So again, 240 for the 8. And then 240 here. Okay. All right. Now, let's go to our half square triangle 3-inch finished. Let's go over here, half square triangle, 3-inch finished, search. So here are 2 dies, and let's just take the one with the cube because most of us are using our cubes. So this is a 3-inch finished half square triangle. It's in the 6-inch cube, shape 3, and the 12-inch cube, shape 5. So we're going to calculate, and we know the size is 3 inches. So we need 120 of them. So we'll put 120 here and calculate. And here are the instructions. And the fabric you need, the dark fabric, is 29 inches or 0.81 yards. Okay, so dark fabric, which here is our dark floral. So we'll put in the inches, we'll put 29. And in the yards, we'll put 0.81. And for the light fabric is the same as the dark fabric. So we'll go over here. That was our medium background. So we'll put 29 inches and 0.81 yards. So here are your two fabrics that make this this half square triangle, the dark floral and the medium background. Okay. All right. So
how in the world did you figure all this out?
well, it took
You
me a
must have
while.
stayed up late a lot of nights, Carol.
But once I figured it out, I just took off. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'll bet you did.
yeah. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with a quarter square triangle. So let's go quarter square triangle, 3 inches, search. Here we only have one, and it's in the 6-inch cube. So we'll press the calculate button, and I have to just tell you, I need to make this a little more clearer. You know, with a quarter square triangle, we have 3 options. You can use 2 fabrics to make the hourglass. You can use 3 fabrics, or you can use 4 fabrics. So I'll show you when we get the answers here. So we need 120 of these and press calculate. Now this gives you the information for 4 different fabrics. So if you have this, in our case, we have a light and a dark. I'm going to double this. So 19 inches times 2, it'd be 38 inches. So what do we have in our, let's look at our quarter square triangle. We have a light background. So let's find our light back, here it is. And then a quarter square triangle. We're going to put 38 inches. And then double that, we need about 1.06 yards. Okay. So what I did there, fabric 1 is dark and fabric 2 is dark. So that's why I doubled that. So if we look at this, our light and our dark fabric are going to be exactly the same amount. So on the, what do we call it, light blue, we're also going to put 38 inches and 1.06 yards. Okay, so we have the quarter square triangle on this line. The center square, okay, let's close this out. Let's go to square, and it's 3-inch finished. So here are our 2 choices, and we'll use the 6-inch cube again. And this one, we need 30 squares. So here it is 12 inches or 0.33 yards. And the center square is the dark blue. So we'll put 12 inches and 0.33 yards. All right. Now we need the rectangle, 1.5 by 3 inches. So let's go to our rectangle. Now for the rectangle, you put the smallest one. So we need 1.5 inches is the smallest measurement. So we're going to choose 1. And then here are our results for rectangles. And we're going to look for, here it is, the 1.5 by 3 inches is in the 6-inch cube. So we'll press calculate. And this we need 120. and press calculate. So we need 28 inches or 0.78 yards. 20, and that's the check. 28 inches, 0.78 yards. And we're going to do the same thing with this light background square. Go to square, and we need 1.5 inches. So we look here and see, because there's going to be more. Here's 1.5. Here's 1, 1, 1.25, 1.5. So let's take the cube again. This is the 6-inch cube. And we need 120. Let me make sure. 120 of the light background squares. So 120, 18 inches or half a yard. So the light background, where is that? Light, oh, here it is. We need 18 inches and 0.5 yards. Okay. Now the other two squares, we know that we have the same die. We're going to probably use the same die to cut all these squares at 1.5 inch. So let's just put in 240 here and press calculate. So we'll need 32 inches or 0.89 yards. And let's see what our colors are. So we have the check. Let's see, where's my check? Check, here it is. And the check square, 32 inches, 0.89 yards. And you'll see for this medium background square, it's going to be the same thing. So let's put these numbers in the medium background, 0.89. Okay. So we have this check that we have every line is filled out. And you see that the half square triangles and the quarter square triangles, since there are 2 fabrics for each of those units, we have 2 entries for the 2 different fabrics. So let's see, if you wanted to, then you'll need to total these columns up.
Is this in Excel?
It is, and I just thought about it, I should just put the Excel file
What
down too. You can
yeah, you
download.
could just auto sum those and it would auto
Yeah.
sum those columns for you.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so equal. So I can just do this. What? Get out of my way. See if that does that. Yep, there it goes. So now I'll just copy this. Okay, thank you for reminding me about that. So I'll put a copy you can just download and fill out. And I'll also put the Excel file down so people can just use Excel if they have that. So then you'll just know for the dark floral fabric, you'll need this much, 29 inches or 0.81 yards. For the medium background, you'll need this much, 61 inches or 1.7 yards. Now, does anybody have any questions on this?
That really is very helpful.
Go ahead.
The only question I have is you see off to the left when you hit the calculate,
Yes.
and I put this in the comments, but it tells you the fabric and then it says to cut the strips and fan fold, blah, blah, blah. Will
Yes.
that information show up somewhere else, or do we need to make a note of it right here?
No, you would need to make a note of it here.
Okay.
So, you know, the best thing I have found is if you have something where you could take a screenshot, or like Microsoft has that clipping tool, and just clip, you know, this area here, because it tells you the size and everything, and or even just this area. And that way you save some paper. So
Yeah.
because you don't want to, but really then it's easy to go through and just look it up again. It's so
Exactly.
easy.
Hey
Yeah.
guys,
Exactly.
if you're going to use the Excel, you can just put it off on the right. You can put what the cube number is, what the die number is,
Yeah, exactly.
the number of cuts, and the fan folds.
I think I'm going to add that on there. So if you go and download it right now, this won't be on there, but that is a wonderful suggestion. So
Yeah,
I will do
that's a
that.
good idea.
Great idea. I love it. I will have a copy, a PDF that you can download and print. And you can just fill it out by hand, just like I did on the computer.